The rain fell in steady sheets over Birmingham's jewelry quarter, drumming against the worn cobblestones like distant gunfire. Michael Collins pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders, ducking into the doorway of the Crown and Anchor pub. He wasn't trying to escape the weather, not really. What he was running from was far more persistent than any storm. For 3 months, he'd been living with the ghost of Tommy Shelby. Not the real Tommy, mind you, the one from the show, the character that had somehow consumed his entire existence. Every morning, Michael would catch glimpses of people doing double takes as he passed, their eyes lighting up with recognition before uncertainty crept in. Was it him? The man from the show? Without the razor-lined cap and the cigarette perpetually dangling from his lips, he was just another face in the crowd. And that's exactly how he liked it. The pub's interior was a study in amber and shadow, the kind of place where secrets went to die and stories came to be born. Michael chose a corner booth, ordering a whiskey neat from a bartender who barely glanced his way. Perfect. Just another Tuesday night in Birmingham where the ghosts of the past mingled freely with the living. He was halfway through his drink when the door creaked open, letting in a gust of rain-chilled air and a group of young men in suits that were just a touch too sharp to be casual wear. Their laughter carried across the room, but it was their accessories that caught Michael's attention, flat caps perched carefully on styled hair, watch chains glinting in the low light. Peaky Blinders cosplayers. They were becoming more common in Birmingham these days, especially around the tourist spots. One of them spotted him first. Michael saw the moment of recognition flash across the man's face, followed by disbelief, then excitement. He leaned over to whisper to his friends, and suddenly 5 pairs of eyes were fixed on Michael's corner. "It can't be," one of them said, loud enough to carry. "That's not actually him, is it?" Michael considered making a break for it. He'd gotten good at slipping away unnoticed, at becoming invisible in plain sight. But something made him stay. Maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe it was the weight of Tommy Shelby's ghost pressing down on his shoulders, demanding acknowledgement. The boldest of the group approached, clutching something in his hands. As he drew closer, Michael saw it was a flat cap, worn at the edges and decorated with a small silver pin, a replica of the ones from the show. "Mr. Collins?" The young man's voice wavered between excitement and uncertainty. We're huge fans. Would you? I mean, I know you probably get this all the time, but would you mind? He held out the cap like an offering. Michael stared at it for a long moment. It was just a hat, a simple piece of wool and cotton that somehow held the power to transform him from Michael Collins into Tommy Shelby in the eyes of the world. He'd spent years crafting the character, pouring his soul into the role, and yet sometimes it felt like all anyone saw was the hat and the cigarette. His fingers closed around the brim, the fabric familiar against his skin. The pub had gone quiet, the regular patrons turning to watch the scene unfold. Michael could feel the weight of their attention, the expectation hanging heavy in the air. By order of the Peaky Blinders, someone whispered, and a ripple of excitement ran through the crowd. Michael stood slowly, the hat still in his hands. He could walk away right now, leave them with their disappointment and their stories of almost meeting Tommy Shelby. Or he could give them what they wanted, what they'd come looking for in this pub on a rainy Tuesday night. The hat felt heavy as he lifted it, heavier than any crown. As he settled it on his head, he felt the transformation begin, the subtle shift in his posture, the hardening of his gaze. The ghost of Tommy Shelby stirred to life, and Michael Collins disappeared into the shadows where he belonged. What happened next would become the stuff of legend in the Crown and Anchor, a story told and retold until it was impossible to separate truth from fiction. But that's another tale entirely, and like all good stories, it deserves to be told in its own time. The moment the cap touched his head, the air in the Crown and Anchor changed. Michael felt it, the electric anticipation, the collective intake of breath. His shoulders squared unconsciously, his chin lifting just so. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, more fundamental. "Got a cigarette?" he asked, his voice dropping half an octave, taking on that familiar Birmingham edge that had become his trademark. Someone, he couldn't see who, pressed one into his hand. The strike of a match echoed in the sudden silence. What happened next was pure theater, but of a kind that couldn't be replicated on any stage. Michael moved through the pub like a shark through still waters, Tommy Shelby's calculated grace in every step. The young men who'd approached him first stayed close, caught in his orbit, their earlier bravado replaced by something approaching reverence. "You know," he said, addressing no one and everyone, "there's a story about this pub." He paused, taking a long drag from the cigarette. "Back in 1919, my great-grandfather made a deal here that changed the face of Birmingham forever." The words flowed easily, not from any script, but from countless hours spent inhabiting Tommy Shelby's world, understanding how he thought, how he moved, how he commanded a room. An older man at the bar snorted. That's bollocks, mate. This pub wasn't even here in 1919. Michael turned slowly, fixing the man with Tommy's trademark stare, the one that had launched 1,000 memes. No? He took another drag, letting the silence stretch. Then perhaps you'd care to explain why there's a bullet hole behind that mirror dated March 15, 1919? The bartender, who had been watching the scene unfold with growing interest, suddenly straightened. Hang on, how did you know about that? We only found it during renovations last month. A smile played at the corners of Michael's mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. Tommy Shelby's smiles never did. I make it my business to know things, mate. It's how I've survived this long. The pub erupted in excited whispers. Michael hadn't known about the bullet hole. It had been a shot in the dark, the kind of detail that might exist in a city as old and violence-scarred as Birmingham. But sometimes the best performances were built on lucky guesses and calculated risks. As the night wore on, the line between performance and reality began to blur. People bought him drinks, sharing their own family stories of the real Peaky Blinders. Some were obviously fabricated, but others carried the ring of truth, small details about old Birmingham that no television show could capture. A young woman approached, her hands trembling slightly as she held out her phone. Would you mind recording a message for my granddad? He grew up in Small Heath, always told us stories about the Shelbys. He's in hospital now, N.A. Michael cut her off with a raised hand, but his eyes had softened slightly. What's his name? Arthur. Arthur Thompson. He took the phone, staring directly into the camera with an intensity that had become second nature. Arthur Thompson, he began, Tommy's accent thick on his tongue. I heard you've been causing trouble in Small Heath, mate. Time to get back on your feet. We've got business to discuss. The girl's eyes welled with tears as he handed the phone back. He's going to love this. Thank you, Mr. Collins. Michael Collins isn't here right now, he replied quietly, and in that moment it felt true. The night seemed to take on a life of its own after that. Someone started playing old jazz music from their phone, and the pub's atmosphere shifted, becoming something out of time. Michael found himself holding court in his corner booth, dispensing wisdom in Tommy's clipped tones, orchestrating a piece of immersive theater that none of them had planned for. But as midnight approached, he felt the familiar unease creeping in. The same discomfort that always came when he stayed in character too long, when the lines between himself and Tommy Shelby became too blurred. The hat, which had felt like a crown earlier, now seemed to weigh a ton. He stood abruptly, silencing the latest round of questions and stories. Time for business elsewhere, he announced, reaching for the cap. But before he could remove it, a commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. 3 men had entered, real Small Heath tough guys, not tourists or cosplayers. Their eyes locked onto Michael, recognition and something else flickering across their faces. One of them was holding what looked suspiciously like a real razor-lined cap. Well, the largest of them growled, his accent pure Birmingham streets. Look who's pretending to be a Peaky Blinder in our pub. Michael felt his heart rate spike, but Tommy Shelby's mask remained firmly in place. He'd spent years perfecting that unflappable exterior, but he'd never had to test it quite like this. As the men advanced, he realized that the performance was far from over, and the next act might be the most dangerous one yet. The 3 men spread out as they approached, an unconscious display of street-learned tactics. The pub's atmosphere shifted instantly, the playful theater of moments ago replaced by something far more dangerous. Michael could feel the young fans behind him tensing, uncertain whether this was part of the show. It wasn't. You've got some nerve, the man with the razor cap said, his voice carrying the weight of generations in Small Heath. Coming here, playing dress-up, telling stories about our families. Michael's mind raced. He could try to maintain Tommy's persona, feed them the kind of line that would sound perfect on television. But something told him that would be exactly the wrong move. These men weren't here to see a performance, they were here because they thought he was mocking their heritage. In one smooth motion, he removed the cap and placed it gently on the table. You're right, he said, letting his natural Dublin accent return. I'm not Tommy Shelby. I'm just an actor who played him. The lead man's eyes narrowed. An actor? You're the one from the show. Michael nodded. Michael Collins. And I apologize if I've caused any offense. I know the real history of the Peaky Blinders isn't something to be taken lightly. A tense silence followed. The man studied him, then barked out a surprising laugh. Bloody hell. My gran loves your show. Won't shut up about it. He pulled up a chair, spinning it around to sit. Buy us around and I'll tell you what the Peaky Blinders were really like. My great-grandfather ran with them, you know? Not the Shelbys, they're mostly fiction, but the real gang. The atmosphere in the pub transformed again. The other two men pulled up chairs and the young fans who'd started the whole thing gathered round, eager to hear authentic history. Michael ordered a round of drinks, settling in to listen rather than perform. For the next hour, he heard stories that had never made it into any script, small details about how the gangs really operated, the unwritten rules of old Birmingham, the way the city had changed and stayed the same. The man with the razor cap, who introduced himself as Danny, showed him the real thing, explaining how it was different from the show's props. "See here?" Danny pointed to the stitching. "Family heirloom, this is. Not as fancy as what you lot wear on TV, but it did the job." As the night wound down, Danny held out the cap to Michael. "Go on then. One last photo for my gran? She'll never believe I met you otherwise." Michael hesitated, then reached for the genuine article. It felt different from the replica he'd worn earlier, lighter somehow, despite its deadly modification. He positioned it carefully on his head, mindful of its edges. "By order of the real Peaky Blinders," Danny said with a wink, snapping the photo. Later, as Michael stepped out into the now clear Birmingham night, he felt different. The weight he'd been carrying, not just tonight, but for years, had shifted. He reached into his pocket, feeling the business card Danny had given him with an invitation to visit Small Heath proper to learn more about the real history. Walking through the quiet streets, he passed his reflection in a shop window. For the first time in years, he saw himself clearly, not Tommy Shelby, not the actor playing Tommy Shelby, but Michael Collins, a man who had been given the privilege of bringing a piece of history to life. The ghost of Tommy Shelby was still there, but it had become something else, not a burden to bear, but a bridge between past and present. His phone buzzed, a message from Danny. The photo was striking, but not for the reasons Michael expected. Yes, he was wearing the historic cap, but his expression was entirely his own. No calculated stare, no practiced intensity. Just a man appreciating a moment of genuine connection. "My gran says you look more like a real Peaky Blinder in this than you ever did in the show," Danny's message read. "Says it's because you're not trying to be one." Michael smiled, screenshotting the message. Tomorrow, he'd go back to being an actor. He'd wear the replica cap when fans asked, smile for their photos, give them the Tommy Shelby they wanted to see. But now he had something else too, a reminder that sometimes the most authentic performance comes from knowing exactly who you are beneath the costume. He turned toward home, humming a jazz tune from earlier in the night. Above him, the Birmingham stars shone down on a city of ghosts and stories, of actors and gangsters, of fiction and truth, all of them dancing together in the dark.
Tell us in the comments what part of this story impressed you the most. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next videos. See you in the world of incredible events.